All right, so that needs to go in here. And I need to put a lib directory in here. And player lives in the lib directory. OK, so now the error message has changed. So as I'm test driving, my goal is to get the error message to change every time I make code changes. If I make code changes and the error message doesn't change, then the code changes I've made are either wrong or incomplete. So I've now changed it. My error message is now undefined is equal to false. Let's do this. I'm going to actually roll this up a little bit for the folks sitting in the back. That way you can kind of see the error message. The rest of it, the stack trace isn't that important. So now what is it? Yep.
Like if you do want, this is an option for you.
Yeah.
If you'd like to stream it while you're doing it, you can use Google, the YouTube stream.
Let's stay with this for a little bit and just see what happens. Is everybody getting some out of this? We need to change it. We can iterate. So undefined is equal to false. What's wrong?
You don't have the property.
I don't have the property, and I can go here to player spec line 5, character 34, and find out exactly what's wrong. So if I go to 5, yep, is playing is missing. So now I'm going to go in here. I am going to come here and do this dot is playing equals to false. All right, I'm green. So I've now just implemented my first test, my first requirement, and I've made it green with the least amount of code that I could. What's the next step? Red, green, refactor. Is there any refactoring I can do here in this code?
Is play not as a function?
We're just going to make it just a property. Yeah. I think it looks pretty good. Yeah? All right, we'll move along. So the next requirement is it is current song is null. OK, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this down. Oops. I'm going to copy this down. I do a lot of copying when I write code. Is equal to null. OK, so I now have my test. I'm going to run it. At some point, hopefully, you become bored with this repetition. That's good. That means you're getting it. It does get a little monotonous, but I'd rather have the process be monotonous and have the code be exciting than have the process be exciting and the code be monotonous. OK, so undefined is equal to null. I'm missing what? I'm missing the current song method or current song property. Oops. All right, that was that easy. So red, green, any refactoring opportunities here? So I'm going to move this up.
You can create a function that checks arbitrary is playing or current song, and you can write a function that does both.
I could write a function that does both. So what would that look like? Lead me through what that would look like. OK. I think it's a good idea. I just can't in my head picture what that would be. So I see duplication. So I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to get rid of the duplication. I am going to write a before function that will assign this to there. Because that was refactoring, it should have stayed green, but it didn't. And what happened? Before each is the function. So that you saw one of the ways that it acts as a compiler. I thought it was before. I was wrong. The test told me, like, hey, before doesn't exist. I'm like, oh yeah, that's before each. I change the code and I go back to green. So you literally, like, you never have to ask yourself, like, what does this method do? Just implement it and run the test, and let's see what the tests tell you. The tests give you this instant feedback loop. So someone brought up Agile. One of the tenets of Agile is fast feedback loops. This is how I get fast feedback loops on my code, pretty much in real time. I write some code, I run the tests. I write some code, I run the tests. OK, so that is now, we've now implemented our default behaviors. Now our product owner comes to us and says, that's great, the player doesn't do anything, we now need to make it do something. So the player is playing a song, and the current song is equal to the song that you told it to play. So let's write some tests. I'm just going to copy this one because one of the things I don't like about Jasmine is the verboseness of this. There's a lot to type there, like functions and all that fun stuff. So player can play a song. So I'm going to use the player I have from up here. I am going to create something called a song, a new song object. I am then going to, so that's my setup. What's my do something? I'm just going to tell the player to play a song. That's the do something. That's the new method, the new function that I'm going to implement. And then what's my expectation?
Current song to equal song.
Yep, that's one of them. What's the other one? Is playing true. So this is where I might violate that one assertion per test rule, because this really tells me the full story of what playing means. The downside being that if this test fails, I don't get any feedback on this test. So this is one of those. You could break it up into two. I think it tells a better story, but I could be swayed a different way. OK, so now I've implemented the business behavior. I'm going to go back and run my tests. It says song is not defined, so that now tells me that I'm missing a whole song class. I'm going to cheat. My goal is to now get the error message to change, which it didn't. I'm like, oh, I forgot. Yeah, I forgot that require up here. And you're like, well, why didn't you just do it the first time? It doesn't cost me anything to just run the test. Like, it's so fast that I don't even have to. It kind of lets you be a little dumb. Like, what is the next step? I'm just going to let the computer tell me what the next step is. It's like, anybody married in here? You know, yes. Yeah, when your wife's like, I want something, you're like, what exactly do you want? I will give that exact thing to you. You just ask the computer, like, what's next? What is the next step? Because as a developer, I am learning so many new tools at this point that I can barely remember what all of them do. So now I run the tests again. It has now changed the error message. It says undefined is not a function. Anybody want to guess what I'm missing?
Play.
I'm missing play. Prototype.play equals a function that takes a song and does nothing. You might be saying, well, why don't you just implement the code? Because I don't technically have a failing test yet. I have code that doesn't compile. So if you were in Java, the compiler you wouldn't even get to the point where the tests are running at this point. So now I have what we call a properly failing test. I have an assertion that says null is equal to something that I told it was supposed to be. So now I actually have a properly failing test. And this is a good skill to have, is knowing when the tests are failing properly and when they're not failing properly. Because if the test is not failing the way you expect it, and you write a bunch of code and that doesn't change it, you have to kind of undo all the code. So this tells me that I'm not saving the song. Current song is equal to song. And now I expected false to equal to true. What else can I do in here? Yeah, so when I say a song, I'm just going to say is playing is equal to true. and I'm back to green. So I'm writing the least amount of code I need to write to make the test green. So red, green, refactor. Do we have any refactoring opportunities here? No, that's pretty clean. What about song? Do we have any refactoring opportunities in song? Nope. Yeah, there's nothing there really. These demos are hard because these like the demos become straw man. There's not anything super exciting, but it's more to get you in the rhythm. And yes, I do look at every file that I change to make sure there are refactoring opportunities. If you start to get lazy and you're like, oh, I don't think I need to look at that file, inevitably you've left a comment in that file, and now you check commented code into source control. And if you are on my team and you check in commented code, I get very upset because that code has a cost, and I don't want to pay that cost if we're not using it. So that's a whole nother discussion. So yes, I do look at every file I change and make sure that it's exactly the way I want it to go in there, and I'm very anal retentive about this. Because on small projects, not a big deal, but on big projects, if every person leaves a little bit of code in there, now you got a bunch of cruft. That stuff has a cost. And there was a question back there.
So when you, again, not to get into that whole thing, when you say it has a cost, do you mean like technical overhead to like unpack it, or do you mean like?
I am a believer that every line of code, regardless of whether or not I'm using it, incurs a cost in my mind. So as I'm going through a file and I see commented code, the first thing I do is ask the question is like, why is this code here? And the fact that I had to stop and ask that question is a cost because a split second has gone by that I can't be doing something else. Yeah, like code is a debt.
Like cognitive cost.
A cost. It might be a monetary cost. It might be a cognitive cost. But there's a price you pay for every piece of code you have in your repository.
You're talking about opportunity cost.
Opportunity cost, cognitive cost. Like if I look at commented code, when did that code get commented out? Oh, do we need that anymore? Like I start wandering off into like la la land of why that code is there. If the code's not there, I can just make the assumption that everything that's there is important to us.
So with testing, you don't comment the code.
I do not comment my code, except when I want to explain why. If I have to explain what the code is doing in a comment, the code is not expressive enough. I've misnamed something or I've written code that doesn't make any sense to anybody. What I will comment is like, I might comment why I've done something. Like, this is a hack because of performance reasons, please don't change this. Or see me before changing it. So I will write those comments, but I will not comment my code as to like what the code is doing most of the time. I will use variable names and functions and abstractions to try and do that. Sometimes it doesn't work and I'll drop a comment in there, just be like, hey, but comments go stale really quickly because they're not running code. How do you know when you change that code that the comment's still valid? Well, someone's got to check that out. Many people that even say that this is documentation in a comment, and you should not even have those. Your test should read from top to bottom so that if someone coming into the code can understand clearly what the code is doing. That's a crutch, many people will say, which allows me to write, lesser code. I don't necessarily adhere to that, but there are many people that I respect that don't even write that stuff. Their tests are so clear that you can just be like, yep, I understand exactly what's happening here without any of that. Yeah. There's another question.
I don't really have a question. I just kind of disagree with you there.
Perfect.
I've got a system I'm building right now. I probably got 10,000 lines in it. I'm going back and doing some refactoring because when I first started writing it, I didn't know as much as I know now.
Yep.
So I got a bunch of crappy code.
Yeah.
And now as I'm looking at it, I don't quite understand what it was that I was doing.
Yep.
So now I'm actually adding comments because if I have to come back 6 months from now and change this again, I'm going to know what was going through my mind when I was writing it. So I don't quite agree with you. I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
For me, that doesn't work.
That's awesome. And you should continue to comment your code if it works for you. Because you've reduced cognitive overhead at that point. For me, I've been writing software for 17 years. Like, you're writing Rails code, I pretty much know how Ruby and Rails works. But if you're learning, you are a much better developer now than you were probably 2 days ago and 2 days before that. And if that serves you, that's great. I've just seen one too many big code bases on big teams go horribly south because I read the comment, I read the code, and I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense to me. So, yeah.
So the whole culture would have to be built around making
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, the statement was that you need to keep them up to date. And if that's totally fine, if you want to pay that overhead, knock your socks off.
Sometimes they get totally separated. They
It's
end up with different
it's
things.
tricky. It's tricky, especially on big projects with like multiple developers and like undisciplined developers. It can get really tricky. At the end of the day, you just want to understand the code, because it's not the code that we want; it's the business value added by the code. So whatever you need to do to make the business value make sense, yeah. I mean, it's all what makes it better. And I like to say that my opinions are strong. I have very strong opinions, very loosely held. If you give me a really good reason as to why I shouldn't be doing something, I am more than happy to change my mind. You will run into some developers that are not that way. It is strong opinions held very strongly, and those people are interesting people to talk to. Which is why I asked you why, because I want to know why you're making those decisions. Because if you have a very valid reason why, then you should keep doing them. If you can't tell me why you're doing something, I now question your ability to whether or not you understand what you're doing. So I always like to ask people why, and I always like to have people ask me why. So I do a lot of mentorships, and I mentor junior developers. And I love when they ask me questions, because now it gives me the opportunity to go back and assert that I still understand what I was talking about. Yeah, call me on my stuff. Like, I am more than happy to have people do that when people do that. So yeah, that's a great point. If it helps you make more sense, then we can totally disagree. And I'm glad you disagree with me, because it's adding value to your world. All right, so back to testing. Red, green, refactor. I'm going to call this pretty darn solid.
Can you just bring up the player file?
Yeah, totally.
2 seconds.
Yep. So super simple. Yes, sir.
One more question. Maybe like afterwards, you have the code base already there.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
okay.
Yep. We can go through my final solution. I think I have 2 of them actually. I think they might be the same. I haven't actually compared them. And that's actually a really interesting point. So one of the ways you get good at this, and there's a slide at the end, is just by practicing. So you pick these really small, what seem like stupid examples, but you're really there to practice the process, not build amazing software that's going to make people millions of dollars. Because if you do this, then when you get to, when you're building software that's going to make people's millions of dollars, you do it much faster. Anybody do Kung Fu or martial arts in here? Yeah, wax on, wax off, paint the fence. Like that's what you're doing here. Is you're literally doing what we call katas. Exercises, small exercises that allow you to become better at things. Okay, cool. So let's see if we have more requirements, which we probably do. Pausing a song. The player reports it is not playing a song, and the player reports the current song as the song that was playing. So I'm going to run through this pretty quickly, because some of you are probably picking up on the pattern. So I'm going to copy that. I give a song that I'm playing. I'm going to play it. I am then going to call a method called pause. And what are my assertions here? Is playing is false. Awesome. And the current song doesn't change. So we're in the tests. Undefined is not a function, which means that I need to implement this. You'll notice that as soon as I copy that, I delete the code that's in there. I just use it because I don't want to retype all this stuff, but I immediately delete it. Just get rid of it. I don't want it because I don't know if I'm going to need it or not. I'd rather re-implement it. So now I go back. Now true is equal to false. What's the minimum amount of code that I can do to make this pass?
It's playing false.
Yeah, that is playing is false. And I'm back to green. And you can get into this rhythm where you're busting this stuff out. And it's a fun rhythm because you're getting this constant sense of accomplishment. I go from broken to fixed, and then I get to play with it for a little while, and then I go back. And it's that constant sense of accomplishment. I really like test-driven development for learning. As you're learning to code, you can be like, well, what does this do? Well, I'm going to write a failing test, and here's my assumption of what it does. And if the test passes, then your assumption was correct. If it doesn't pass, then you got to go read the documentation. So this is a really interesting way of learning how to code for new languages that you don't know. The first thing I do when I learn a new language is learn the testing framework. Because then I can learn syntax using the testing framework, and then I can learn semantics and behavior using the actual code itself. All right, what else we got next? Resuming a song. A paused player reports that it is playing again.
We're not going to refactor?
Oh, yeah. There we go. Any refactorings? See, someone caught me. This is why we pair program at Pivotal, because sometimes I get ahead of myself. So we also pair 8 hours a day, which makes test driving very interesting. You play some fun games with test driving. Any refactorings there?
For each farm song and continue song, possibly?
So what I'm hearing you say is take this up to here, and then that, and then get rid of these. Let's find out. So it's still green. What is the downside of that?
For every test that doesn't need a song, you have an extra object.
Now I have to think about why is this, do I need the song here? I have to look at the code. So it's a little bit of a there's a little extra code, a little bit extra work, very small extra work, but if you had hundreds of thousands of tests, that little bit of work actually might add up. One thing you can do is you can nest the describe blocks. So I will do this sometimes. And now what I can do is I can bring you down here, you here, and oops, I want to copy that, delete that. Get rid of that. And now I know when I'm in that describe block, I'm in a new context. I have some extra behavior. That song is necessary, and I can do that. Be very careful with this. I've been in test suites where you're like 4 describe blocks deep, and you've forgotten like what the heck the setup is. Remember, they should read like stories. It's like if it's choose your own adventure and you're like sticking your fingers into the book. Does everybody remember those choose your own adventure books? Am I dating myself? Where you're like sticking your fingers in the pages because you want to go back because the ending you chose didn't really work for you. Be very careful with that. I've seen it get out of hand and you're 5 layers deep and you're like, you have no idea what like the beginning of the story was anymore. But this is.
Do the errors show each of the described text as it's running, if they're nested?
Yes, yes. So when Jasmine runs, let's make one fail and let's check it out. So that's a great question. So I'm going to make that test fail because I know it was passing before. Player with a song, player can play a song message. So it doesn't necessarily read like English, but I think I can make it read like English by doing this. And then if that fails, player with a song can play a song. So one of my goals as I write these nested contexts is I want them to read like English language sentences. Because when the test fails, I want to be like, oh, what is the state of the world? What story is being told here?
The last test is the same name as the third test.
Ah, yeah, see? I copied it, and I had documentation. I didn't change it. Can pause a song. Can pause. Thank you for catching that. Yeah. So.
But what does that fall under? You just changed something that nothing told you was wrong.
Because it's documentation. So that string is documentation. This is the whole discussion of documentation that's out of date. It did. I was lazy. I was sloppy. Someone caught me. Thank you for that. So yeah, I copied and pasted and didn't do my due diligence because I was getting ahead of myself. It's very easy to do. Yes?
In terms of like a workflow, it talks about getting into a groove with this. Does doing a failing test at first help you from having to worry about whether or not your tests are like well formed?
There's a failing test.
Like starting with the failing test, like can help catch bugs in your test. Like, you can't really test the test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's this inception thing, like who watches the Watchmen? Like what tests test the tests? And then by watching them fail first, I can get some feedback that the tests are actually valid. And I'll do this all the time. Like there's a whole idea of there's a tool in Ruby that will actually mess with your code and make sure your tests fail. And it'll like start fiddling with the actual code. It's called Fuzz Testing. And I'll do that all the time, like, oh, like if I change this test, does the test actually fail? And just play some games with it to make sure that the tests are failing. Okay, let's do one more. I won't bore you with the details. And now resuming a song, a paused player reports that it is playing again. A playing player throws an error reporting that it is already playing. So, with a song, it can be restarted. So I want to play I'm just going to new up a song there. Okay, it can be restarted. Let's see how I do there. Interesting. So that test doesn't fail. What do I do? I told you it had to go red first.
Isn't this supposed to be resumed at restart?
Yeah, let me see what I do with the other one. That's a good question. Where's my other window? Oh, it is resumed. Thank you. Good thing somebody's playing product owner.
Well, once again, nothing told you that was wrong.
Well, something did tell me it was wrong. I wrote a test without writing code that was green. That told me it was wrong because I should never write a test that never goes red. So that's what told me it was wrong. Is I was like, oh wow, like that test didn't go red. I have a problem. And yeah, it was like, it made me, at least it stopped me. It was like, oh, did I do something wrong there? And then someone's like, oh yeah, you were going to implement resume, not play again, dummy. So yeah, so that was, it's one of those things where most of what we get paid to do as software developers is think. Like 20% of my time is actually putting ASCII characters on the screen. So you want to like take those times and you want to get into those rhythms where you want to stop and think, because it's really easy to just write code. And anything that breaks you out of that and says like, oh, wow, you didn't. So because sometimes you can get into a rhythm and you're just like mindlessly going. And that's not great either, because you can get into that. And I've practiced this talk a couple of times. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do play. Oh no, wait, I'm going to do resume. Okay, so anybody want to guess what's going to happen here? So there's a game you can play with yourself. It's called Call Your Own Shots. Anybody want to guess what the error message is going to be? Undefined is not a function. So we'll go implement that. Yeah, I went that out. Now it says expected false to equal to true. And whoops, now I'm green. Cool. And now the last one. It throws an error if it is already playing. So play, don't pause it. Now I resume and expect. So this syntax is a little strange in Jasmine. What is that? To throw error.